Welcome to Conscious Eye, living in authentic connection and harmony with self, others, and the world, featuring Ravi and Savitri.
Satnam, Savitri.
Satnam and Namaste, Ravi. Welcome. And here we
Welcome.
are. We are here to have a dialogue with our listeners who have joined us with comments. So I'm
Yeah, this
excited.
is one of our favorite community heartbeat. One of our favorite things to do, our community heartbeats, and check in with folks who let us know they're listening and share their thoughts and ask questions. So thank you to everybody who did that. And some folks reach out to us individually, but I do want to also encourage anybody who's listening, always feel free to leave us a comment right here on YouTube, because that's where we, can collect them and, you can ask questions or let us know things that you're interested in hearing. If there's a topic we would love, to cover for you, things like that. So today, that's what we're doing. We are checking in with y'all and addressing some questions and just really checking in with our community because we're glad that you're here and we're glad to be here.
Yeah, and there are other ways too. The YouTube comment is a great way because that's a go-to for us right away to see people that are responding to the podcast. But you also can put comments when you see it posted on Facebook. So you can comment there and we can capture those. Or you can send an email to consciouseyes108@gmail.com. So, and that link is in our description if you need a quick link. There is one. So, yes, there's lots of ways for you to have your opinions and your questions brought to us. So, we look forward to
Yeah.
hearing more from all of you.
Let us know. And we'll start with a question which comes from Deborah Joy, which we just, you can check in with us or check in our episode last week. We had a great conversation with Deborah and Jill. So this question comes from her recently on our recent series that we did on resilience. So Deborah wrote, how can one be resilient in burnout? How does one be resilient with awareness? And I think, obviously, what a great question because who's not experiencing burnout these days? I mean, I think we get burnout not just from work. Like, I know not everybody is in the workforce, but it's such a, what's the word? One of those words of the moment. Burnout has been for a long time. But we associate it with work, but you can burn out as a caregiver, you can burn out as a family member, you can burn out as a friend. I think there's so many different areas in life that are asking so much of us, that it's not just related to work. So, how can we be resilient in burnout?
Yeah, and I want to add one more thing. And it feels maybe a little bit dissonant, but you can burn out from too much joy, celebration, and
Yeah,
activity.
yeah.
I mean, I think of a wedding as that as an example where, it starts with great plans and hope and the future, and all the details are dreams that you start to come through, or maybe you choose a simple wedding of some type, or maybe you just go visit the local governmental center and have it done there. The thing about it though is that just the whole anticipation, all of the things you need to organize can cause burnout. So often we think of it as something that maybe over time becomes drudge work, but it can be something that we really look forward to and want to feel joy with as well. Yeah.
Well, so when I think about how can one be resilient and burn out, in your example of the wedding, like, we can burn out even in really joyful times.
Hmm.
I think where does that burnout feeling come from? And when I think of a wedding, it's like, well, when I think everything has to be perfect, or I have to get all this done, or if I don't do this, it's not going to be right. So apply that to maybe any area of life, but I think a wedding was a great example because it is a joyful experience. But when we experience burnout, I think that's a really good example to expose that when we experience burnout very, very often, it's just the internal pressure that we're putting on
That's
ourselves.
right.
The
Hmm.
external thing is the thing that we want to point our finger at and go, this is doing that. But it could be a wedding, it could be your work, it could be this. But, so why? What is that? What is it that, where is that pressure coming from? And in Kundalini Yoga, one of the sutras is when the time is on you, act, and the pressure will be off.
Hmm.
And whether that, again, it's a broad statement because it's a thread that can be sewn through many different fabrics. Um, so, if it's maybe that when the time is on, you act and the pressure will be off, maybe that action is just stepping back and letting go of what of the expectation of an outcome. But if you don't take that action, that internal step, that pressure is going to build and build and build until you explode. Or maybe, I'm experiencing burnout at work because I'm letting things pile up, and I don't, it's hard for me to make decisions because there's just too much. Well, then, the time is to act and to, if we find ourselves procrastinating on something because it's a hard decision, reach out, run it by folks, get some other eyes on it, get some different perspectives, but do something that moves that energy. What is it that's keeping that energy stopped? Um, but that's, one way to be resilient in burnout is to take a step back and make sure that that pressure isn't just internal pressure. Like, can I relieve some of that myself by letting something go? The expectation of an outcome, the expectation of how something should look or be. Or is it something that if I take action on, I can move that energy and I can release some of that feeling of burnout now because there's movement and move that through.
Yeah, I love that example and that process and method of addressing burnout from an internal way of being. And I agree with all of those things. And the thought comes to mind that sometimes we get there, but the external events that are causing us to have pressure, maybe in a work environment or a relationship. And what came to mind when you were describing that was I used to commute to Chicago, and this is for you listeners who have a commute that's in bumper to bumper stop traffic for a certain amount of time, maybe every day, or maybe a day where you might have something that you need to be somewhere for at a certain time, and you see the clock ticking and time is slipping away. So having that occur in life on a regular basis, that's that internal thing happening. So we're stuck, right? We're in a vehicle, and we're in wall to wall, side by side, front to back traffic. It's out of our control. And knowing that you may be getting into that and it's causing a depletion in resilience because before you even get in the car in the morning, you start anticipating that. You start anticipating how that may impact your day. And you realize that maybe you're getting a little less patient. Maybe you're getting a little more annoyed. So you become aware of the emotions and sensations and the thoughts that are forming. So what do we do with that? Like you mentioned, having a practice where we can come to, well, it's going to be a little difficult to do that. So maybe doing a little problem solving or brainstorming with yourself or with other people that have that very same experience of wall-to-wall traffic in the mornings that stopped or at night in the evenings coming back. What is it that can shift the perspective internally Maybe it's an audiobook. Maybe it's voice memos. Maybe you actually write a book about the experience of having that in your commute every day in the voice memos. But becoming creative in some way where you can have an immediate outlet during that time, so that what you mentioned, that building and frustration and stress continues to build. There are ways, they're limited, I will definitely agree to that, but there are ways that we can shift our perspective, maybe looking around, becoming curious.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I think there's a myriad of ways, but I think that speaks also, you just kind of started stepping into how does one be resilient with awareness. And I want to do circle back to, you're mentioning in that scenario, being stuck in traffic, your internal world is beginning to become a jumble, and maybe we're getting road ragey or whatever. You start focusing on people outside of you and what they're doing and getting so angry about them. First, is there a physical action I can take? When the time is on, you act and the pressure will be off. Like, can I get up earlier? Do I need to leave earlier? So that would that relieve some of the pressure? If there is, so there's, this is kind of like a marriage of the two things, our external and our internal world. Is there an external action I can take to relieve some of that pressure? And then if I still find myself, if it's the anger, like I know I'm going to be on time or whatever to work or wherever I'm supposed to be, if then that internal world is still getting ragey or whatever, where is that focus, right? Yeah, an audiobook, music, allowing, even just maybe shifting your mindset and saying, what are some ways I can entertain myself? Bring it back to yourself, whatever. Or, like you said, voice notes, or maybe you have a standing conversation with a friend, or you're listening to podcasts, whatever it may. So there's just a myriad of ways. And, I think when we have that, it is like anything, you have the potential for a positive, negative, or neutral state of being. Do you focus on what everybody is doing around you and blaming them for, your situation, why I'm stuck here, or I don't like the way they're moving or doing this and that? Or can I step back and make it a positive experience, maybe being like, great, I can get a chapter of my book done, listen to on my way to work, or I can listen to that podcast that I was wanting to check in on. Or is it just neutral? Or maybe we're just sitting there and allowing ourselves to be, and just allowing that space to kind of be almost meditative, just observing without it having to be positive or negative. And I think that can apply. I love that example because it's one that we find ourselves in, or anybody can find themselves in, but it can be applied across the board.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's where I started learning a little bit about managing the frustration that ultimately was causing burnout, because I was thinking, oh, I need to make that drive again, when I actually enjoy drives. Going out and being in the vehicle and moving. It was impeding that pleasurable thing that I had associated with taking a trip, and it became something else. So adjusting my perspective really helped a lot. Did it completely eliminate that? But no, every once in a while I started taking the train, and that helped.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I wish we had better public transportation in the States, because there's something so relaxing. And I know there are some places, in the city, but also our public transportation isn't exactly always up to most, modern standards. And I just, having lived in China and being able to, I'm not saying I lived in a very rural area. Not all of the buses or trains were comfortable and lovely. I did sit by some chickens from time to time on my way to Teeling. But to be able to relax and just move along, you're in motion, just feeling that and not having to worry about when you arrive. I love public transportation for that. Getting on a bus or riding in a
what you
subway.
just described, feeling relaxed and moving along and being somewhat meditative in the space that you're in, and your public transportation in China was able to help you with that. But I think that's a great description of what we want to come to in whatever way we're able to be able to hold and build our resilience and avoid having burnout about a particular event or something that is one of our responsibilities, because often we can have burnout based on responsibility. We're burnt out. We're just in charge and doing everything. And so that shift in perspective to get to that almost self-forgiveness, I think, at least from my perspective, when I find myself coming to the abyss of burnout, because that's how I see it, and I'm looking down, I'm thinking, okay, what is it about this that has been repetitious and causing this? And often it's because I have unrealistic expectations of what I can actually accomplish.
Yeah.
So I'm doing it to myself. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think those are a couple of points that really illustrate how to be resilient with awareness. Um, and I want to, I think we've done a lot of glorifying the hustle culture, hustle and grind, mindset, and glorified overexerting ourselves. And I think one way that we can be resilient with awareness is and it's that rest is resistance. So just resisting that kind of capitalistic hustle and grind, patriarchal capitalistic idea that, like, if I'm not producing something that's earning or, related to economic value, then there's no value at all. So I think another way to be resilient with awareness is to rest, to do things that bring you joy, to be creative, to produce things that don't have economic value in the sense that, they don't have a monetary value, but there's a richness internally that's built because you're doing these things that you value. And I think that builds resilience, and that takes awareness, and it also takes resistance to the current system that is keeping us in a constant state of burnout, regardless of what it is, with its family or school or work or hobbies. Even your hobby, can become well, let's monetize it, get it on Etsy, get this, and maybe, so there's all these traps of, it's just the culture. Our culture is, if it's not productive, if it's not contributing economically in any way to your life, then there's no value. And I think that we become aware and build resilience, especially to burnout, by giving ourselves permission to do things just for the sake of doing them, and to rest, and to not have to disengage from that idea that every single thing that we do has to be productive or lead to something. So obviously we talk about Thomas and inertia can be, we can go completely down that way on the spectrum, but we're talking about burnout, so I won't digress.
Well, I'm smiling because you caught me on that one. Really, really caught me, because I was known to say, and I really say it to myself every once in a while, and I'm trying to readjust my perspective. But my comment would always be, if I'm not making money, I'm wasting my time. That used to be an adage. People would say something to me like, oh, you seem to really enjoy what you're doing here. And I'd come back with that. If I'm not making money, I'm wasting my time. Entrepreneurial perspectives have a tendency to be in that mode. Not everybody, but I think that, and I'm not calling myself an entrepreneur, but I've noticed that in my coaching work with people, often that shows up, especially when people are highly vested in what you were talking about, and that is making their hobby their money source.
Right. Well, and of course, we're all familiar with the adage, time is money, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that is, couldn't be more, time is so much more valuable than money. Time is so much more valuable, and you can always earn more money, but you cannot get that time back.
Mm-hmm.
And it's when we have a shift in perspective and we become aware of what's valuable, you build resilience by giving yourself grace and investing your time and energy in things that give you that resilience, that
Mm-hmm.
fill your prana bank, that give you life force energy and don't deplete you and leave you at the end of your life wondering what you've done.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So
Next question. No.
yeah, yeah. Let's look at
Now
another
that we,
comment. What do we have?
I was like, now that we've solved that, um, I like, there was a good one. So that was from our very recent series on resilience, and we covered four different topics going over that. So thank you, Deborah Joy, for that comment and those questions. That was great. I wanted to take us back to episode 34, which was
Mm-hmm.
betrayed but not broken, because
Yeah.
we talked a lot, I mean, about betrayal, which I think is something everybody in life experiences from time to time. And whether that's in a friendship or a marriage or a work, even a job, in your work environment or family. Um, so I love this comment. Oh, and this is from, it's L.E. Corson. I'm not sure if that's Lee Corson, but still listening along. But I've come to the consideration that forgiveness, because we talked about forgiveness and how do
Mm-hmm.
we get, over betrayal. I've come to the consideration that forgiveness is not necessary and actually probably shouldn't be given unless in the person's own value system. Compassion is very different. And I thought that was such an insightful comment, and I'm not even sure if I'm interpreting it correctly, but what I'm hearing is saying, look, you shouldn't be required to forgive. It may not be necessary unless it's part of your value system. But maybe compassion is more important in us getting through, over betrayal or over the hurt that our harm that someone else has caused. And and I think that I think I'm kind of curious about that, because forgiveness to me isn't about the other person.
Right.
It's not about but I this I want to, I think this is a great topic to discuss, because this is just, forgiveness isn't something. I'll share an experience. So I had a tough time with my brother, and he did something that I perceived to be very hurtful and harmful, and I actually asked him to come over to my home one time, because I demanded. I'm like, you need to apologize for what you did. And he absolutely refused. And I was so angry and more hurt. And now, processing through, if you go back and listen to our last episode on grief, probably, I'm sure, experiencing a lot of grief. And I had to come to a place where I was able to forgive and not ask for apology. I had to let go of my need for, it wasn't about excusing what I still felt was a hurtful action, but I had to, I guess, and I'll use the word I didn't really think of it. Let it go, but forgive that, so that I could move on and not be angry or not be, feel that grief anymore. And just understand that I am okay in my experience and how I came through that experience, and that hasn't that I think that forgiveness in a way prevents the harm from perpetuating itself.
Yeah, I love what you said about forgiveness was for you. And I think that's the thing that sometimes gets a little bit confusing for people when they think about forgiveness. They think about, okay, well, I have to approve of what they did or somehow make it make sense to me in order to be able to do that. But when we think about activities or events, things that occur, between people, because that's what we're talking about, right? Someone says or does something and it causes a sense of betrayal to the receiver, and the receiver is perceiving it as betrayal, and they hold on to that. Sometimes it goes into a grudge, but sometimes we just stop at the sense that, oh, you betrayed me, in a way that it's an internalization. And so, from a perspective of thinking about samskaras, it becomes a samskara. So, what we're looking for is moksha, release from that. And so that comes from within us. We can release that perspective, that sense, that energetic of feeling betrayed, still recognize that the event occurred, but it causes a break. So there's a detachment. And then we can become free of it. That person still may continue to do what they were doing or whatever. Next time we may recognize it and not feel so betrayed, or may not feel betrayed at all. We just,
Right.
you know. So it's a forgiveness to me is a pathway to moksha.
It's like that saying, being angry uh, doesn't poison the other person, it poisons you.
Uh-huh.
And to me, that's like if you hang on to the resentment or the bitterness, um, forgiveness is just a word to me of not excusing behavior or approving of or
Mm-hmm.
even accepting in any way, shape, or form the harm that was done, but a way of letting go and releasing the poison from your own body and being, um, so that it no longer has that hold on you. And then what you just said, maybe the next time that action happens, it doesn't even have that impact on you or that effect on you because you realize I can detach from that. I don't have to take that on
Right.
because that's really about them and not about me,
Right.
um, or about that situation.
Yeah, and I think part of it, if we think about it, when a certain activity, event, someone says something that you might normally inside consider betrayal or harmful or hurtful, that's our choice to feel that way because that's the ego trying to protect us. And so we can stop for a moment, like you mentioned, and really take stock of what that means. And if we choose to engage with it, we can engage with it many different ways. We can verbally engage with it. We can get involved in the activity with it. We can hold it, like you mentioned, and continue to let it, and I'll use the word fester, because that's kind of what happens, and then it grows and it gets bigger. And you're right. Who does it harm? It's certainly not harming that person who already did something that they thought was harmful. It's only harming us as receivers of that.
Right.
And self love, should we find it in this event, um, almost requires us to take that step to detach and provide an internal relief of moksha. It's a freedom from that
Mm-hmm.
experience. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I don't disagree that forgiveness is not necessary. Um, but because in a sense that's just a word, but can we let go of, can we detach from, can we experience liberation from perceived harm, or real harm, because that if we don't in some way, shape, or form let go of that, process it, soften it, it will have an impact mentally, emotionally, physically. Um, and I agree also with our listener that compassion is different. Compassion does allow you to, again, that's it's not necessarily sympathy and having sympathy, maybe understanding like, yeah, I can understand. It doesn't. I can understand why you did that. I can understand. Um, I can understand that you're a hurt person, but it doesn't excuse behavior. Compassion is understanding that because we're human, we all have the capacity to be capable of doing or being or feeling whatever someone else may do or feel or be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's different than having sympathy and saying, "Oh, I'm sorry for you," because
Mm-hmm.
I may not be, because I may feel like, well, a lot of people go through that and also and don't do that harmful thing. But compassion allows me to say, in my humanity, I can see how that may come to be, and it softens and creates space for being able to let that go or neutralize that, or if we use the word, find forgiveness
Mm-hmm.
and let it let it go, be
And
detached.
I think what you're saying is that we're not going to agree that it was behavior or words that were appropriate. We can recognize the way that the event or the words occurred and still know that it doesn't fit with our value system. But we can recognize that that individual has a life that they're living with a perspective and worldview that maybe we don't share. And it was a product of that. We're getting into some interesting territory, I think. I'm realizing that I'm going down a rabbit hole thinking about, well, how much forgiveness is forgiveness? And where is that line of just detachment and then coming across detachment every once in a while and saying, well, I understand what you're doing? That's different. So compassion is a little trickier almost in being able to come to that, in my mind, from my perspective, than forgiveness. For me, forgiveness can just be, just to simplify it, cut and dried detachment. But compassion still means that there's some energetic going on there that I'm sending out. So I have to think about that a little bit more.
Yeah, that's
It's
an interesting
interesting.
point. And I think, and going back to the, I don't think forgiveness is necessary. I think there's lots of ways, we've talked about rituals in daily life that can help us. And one of the rituals that you may use is cord cutting. Just
Mhm.
sometimes just, cutting our energetic connection to the situation or the person or the energy. Um, Cutting that cord again can neutralize us and bring us to a more neutral, detached state.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah. I think
yeah,
about it one other way too, which just came to mind, and that is, I'm always going to, at least at some point, maybe not every episode, but once in a while, here comes the astrology. But Ardra, that nakshatra, is one about the storm. And then after the storm, there's purification with the teardrops. And then there's clarity. And the clarity, if we think about that as a metaphor for what we might go through, where the storm is the betrayal, we have an emotional response of some type, and we clear that energetic from ourselves and what we're left with is clarity. We see what happened differently. This is a lot of words, and it's a lot easier to talk about it than to actually experience it. But if anyone has a sense of what that might feel like or be like for them, please uh, send a comment or an email to us, because I know I'm really at that point of, can I really step into this and do it or make it work or make it happen for me? Some days yes, some days not so much. Yeah.
Well, and yeah, I think you have to, forgiveness, or neither forgiveness nor compassion requires that we give up our right to experience and sit in our own emotional
Mhm.
experience, to experience our own emotions or sit in our own emotional experience. That I think sometimes we have to fully process that and get through the grief of the emotion that we're experiencing to really get to that point of letting go or forgiving or finding compassion for that. So
And so,
that's a lot. Of course, I mean, again, so many facets you could go on.
mhm.
But definitely, I think, um, yeah, it's interesting. I don't think it's necessary. If you can find other ways to let go of that energy without forgiving that person, I think that's absolutely reason. That's um, no argument. There's not one way to do things, and it is. I think to me, forgiveness is just about it's about you, not the other person. So I think there's many ways that you can go about finding that peace in you. So that what a great question or comment, and thank you
Really,
to our
yeah, yeah.
friends for that. So
And sometimes we can over intellectualize about things too, and then it's becomes a little bit more difficult to actually experience the emotion and the event in a way that we can actually release it. So
yeah,
I go back and forth, head and heart, you know.
right. I just does one. I think we have time for one more. And I like this one. This is from our episode 45, Our Evolution, and Deborah Joy again has commented. I really appreciate this conversation and talking about evolution, de-evolution, symbols that evoke emotions, label history, and symbols that are evolutionary, the vibration of change, the vibration of joy, the vibration of peace, the vibration of transition, and how we assimilate these changes spiritually and human form. Thank you for this conversation. And it took me back to that conversation, and I was like, I just love that comment because it is kind of indicative of what we hoped to do with this podcast, is just acknowledge that that there's bigger conversations that we can have as a collective, and what's important to us, and how we hold space for ourselves and for others in this socio-political, chaotic environment that we're all living in this time, as we really transition from a Piscean to an Aquarian age, and we're going through all this together. And I just loved this comment because I think it kind of encapsulates that. Like, how are we walking together in the vibration of change? How are we embodying the vibration of joy and peace? And how are we holding space for each other in this vibration of transition? Um,
Yeah.
and we had a great conversation with Deborah Joy and Jill last week that I think forwarded, even, brought even that more even forward.
Yes. Hmm.
And to me, I think just, yeah, creating that space, acknowledging that there's room for that there's room for more than what is going to make money, or what is going to, be productive, or what is, you know, there's so many things that we're so tied to that just aren't important. So recentering and refocusing on the collective, and how do we create more joy and peace and space for that, the space of being together and really the vibration of love.
Yeah. You know, I, I love when you read that because it really does encapsulate not just what we were hoping to communicate in that podcast, but when we can go back to last year when we were brainstorming how we would like to um, create this podcast and what was our mission, what was our vision for uh, some of the topics that we wanted to bring forward. And we didn't have them all in place at that time. You know, we've been slowly evolving from topic to topic based on how things have been on a flow for us. But that whole description that she wrote in that comment leads us to our own internal question of how that works for us as an individual. And it, in some ways, is a great definition of an individual's dharma
Mm,
and
right.
how we do that. How we
How we
do
walk our dharmic path, and how do we do that as a collective.
hmm
And we have our own, and what I kind of feel like what we're going through now is, well, you, it, so it's that we're evolving on our own path. There's this de-evolution of some things that we've, I think, as a society and culture that we have, we're taking some steps. It looks like, it can feel like and look like we're taking some steps back, but I feel like even that is part of the process of evolving as a collective. But it's what you just said struck me, how we're doing that on our own dharmic path, but we're doing it all together,
we are. hmm
and how we assimilate these changes spiritually and in human form. I mean, like, why do it? Just, it's almost like, well, what's the point? It's like, oh, try it and see how you move through the world in that space. Like, just try it, let go. Because I mean, it's like, these things are so important. I have to be worried about this and what the news says and what's in the food and what's happening to the children and oh, what's happening here. And we get so caught up in the news, and it's like, let's take a step back. Where are you in your dharmic path? Connect to that and come into that space, into the flow of the collective that is that. And just see what happens. Just see what happens.
And the interesting thing about it will be that we all connect in different ways and we have an energetic involvement in particular things. And together, as a group of individuals, we cover the whole thing. We don't have to individually be involved in every single one of those things that you named,
Right.
plus all the
Right.
other stuff that's out there. We have, because of our Dharma, we have a specific focus as to what we do to grow and evolve our soul, but also to contribute to the collective while we're here on
Right.
this planet and resolve karma. So we have lots of things to do. And I think sometimes what happens is that there are so many needs, so many things that need advocacy right now that we go, oh yeah, I need to help with that, or oh,
I need to do
that one
that. I
looks
need to
good, I
do
need to
that.
help with that one too.
Do that.
And then what happens is you become diffuse. And
Yes, your
before
energy
you
is
know it,
dispersed.
where the focused energy might actually make a huge difference, yes, you might be making ripples along the way with a lot of different things, but what is your truth? Where is your
Right.
integrity in walking your path? And looking at
Right.
where our duty is can sometimes bring us into a narrower focus where we can um, not burn out, first of all, getting back to that topic, but at the same time be able to contribute in a way that is satisfying to us and to others. So,
Maximize impact, right? And yeah, maximize satisfaction and maximize impact. I mean, it truly, it doesn't make sense until it's practiced and you start to see that whole connection of the micro with the macro, as within, so without. So when I bring myself into my purpose and path, really, really, even when it feels like I can't, like I just don't have time, there's this going on, and there's that fire over there, and there's that emergency, and that over there, that it doesn't seem possible. But do it and then see what happens.
Yes.
That's all.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. I just love going back to these comments. This
Yes.
is so much fun to be able to have a response and a dialogue with people through the comment section. So hopefully more and more of you will uh, get sparked by something.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I love because Samantha, do it like she said. I love choosing which episode to listen to so I can be in the right mindset for each topic. I'm taking my time with them. Go back, peruse through the topics and see which one speaks to you that day. Sometimes and I know, I just want to mention again, I know we've said it before, but it's been a while. Sometimes you'll see maybe one of our episodes is related to an astrological event and it's past, but know that that energy is coming, it comes back around, it's cyclical, so there's always some application. So choose whatever one speaks to you, um, because it just might be that message that you need for that day. So I love that comment from Samantha as well. So thank you to all of our listeners. We love that you're here and keep us. I mean, I guess we've got enough that we'll keep doing it as we come up on a year. And feel free to send us any topic ideas and just always, check in and let us know how you're doing um, and what's standing out to you.
Yeah. So let's like and share, subscribe. It's free. That will give you, and if you ring the bell, mark that one, you'll get notified when the new podcasts arrive, and you'll be able to then know they're there. And then look for posts on Facebook and Messenger and Threads,
But
Instagram. They're everywhere. We,
yeah,
we we let you know so that you can maybe.
like, share, subscribe. That kind of activity, boosts us, it boosts the algorithm is the best way. It doesn't take much, so don't forget to do it. And it's so great that you're here, and we will see you next time.
Next week. Namaste.
Sat Nam.